प्रणाम सभी को, सारे श्रोताजनों को। और खास करके स्वागत करते हैं सुधीर जी आपका। आज हमारे सुधीर जी हमारे आज के एक्सपर्ट गेस्ट स्पीकर है आज के सेशन के। और आज के सेशन की हम शुरुआत करते हैं। आज का हमारा जो मंथली वेबिनार है वो है इट्स अबाउट द फ्यूचर सिनेरियोस फॉर ह्यूमैनिटी। अब इसको थोड़ा सा अगर मैं सरल भाषा में अगर बताऊं तो इसका सीधा संबंध लगता है ये हमारे जो जैन दर्शन में गृहस्थों के 11 व्रत है उसमें से एक व्रत है जो है दिक् परिमाण व्रत। इसका सीधा संबंध ये व्रत के साथ जुड़ा हुआ है। हमने पिछले हमारे कई सेशनों में बहुत सारे एक्सपर्ट गेस्ट स्पीकर से चर्चा करी है, मेनली अबाउट परिमाण व्रत के बारे में, या उससे जुड़े हुए जो अलग अलग सब्जेक्ट्स है उसके बारे में, दैट व्हाई वी शुड रिफ्रेन फ्रॉम एक्यूमुलेशन ऑफ मटेरियल थिंग्स। ओके, पर ये एक जो विषय है कि जहाँ पर हमें कहा जाता है कि भाई आपको आपका कार्य क्षेत्र सीमित करके रखना है। आपको आप किस किस दिशा में कितना आप प्रवास करोगे, कितना एक्सपैंड करोगे अपने अपनी एक्टिविटीज को, उसको आपको एक हमेशा एक डिफाइन करके रखना है, सीमित करके रखना है। अब ये जो एक विचार है, ये जो एक व्रत जिसे हम कहते हैं, डोंट यू थिंक दैट इट गोज अगेंस्ट द ट्रेडिशनल आइडिया ऑफ हमें जैसे कहा जाता है कि भाई आज हमें सफल होना है, देन यू शुड थिंक बिग, थिंक ग्लोबल। क्या हमारे शास्त्रों में ये विरोधाभास क्यों है? डज इट साउंड एंटी प्रोग्रेसिव, रिग्रेसिव तो कहीं नहीं है? या फिर कहीं ऐसा नहीं लगता कि भाई ये हो सकता है ये आउटडेटेड है, या इट्स नॉट रिलेवेंट इन टुडेज टाइम? तो आज का जो हमारा विषय है वो इन्हीं सारे सब्जेक्ट के ऊपर एक एक डिटेल्ड एनालिसिस एक हमें प्रस्तुत करने वाला है। बहुत ही एक यूनिक सब्जेक्ट है, और एक एक प्रॉपर फ्रेमवर्क के तहत हम इस सब्जेक्ट को आज एनालाइज करेंगे। और उसके लिए हमारे जो आज के हमारे वक्ता है, मैं उसका स्वागत करता हूं और उसका मैं आपको परिचय दिलाता हूं। मिस्टर सुधीर शेट्टी। सुधीर जी, by qualification he is engineer as well as MA in political science। ये अपने आप में बहुत बड़ा एक यूनिक कॉम्बिनेशन है। He had very outstanding academic career as a professor at Wilson College, MIT College at Bandra, and he has taught at Mumbai University in various courses, whether it is MA और environmental management, mass media हो, अलग अलग विषयों में उन्होंने बहुत अच्छा पढ़ाया भी है और रिसर्च भी किया है। एट द सेम टाइम ही इज अ सोशल एंटरप्रेन्योर and founder of a think tank organization known as Orb Trans Research and Broadcasting Foundation। अब ये जो इनकी संस्था है, इनकी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, वो हमारे आज के जो एक आई मीन द ह्यूमन सिविलाइजेशन इज गोइंग थ्रू वैरायटी ऑफ क्राइसिस। क्राइसिस की हम बात करें तो जैसे एक पर्यावरण का क्राइसिस है, एनवायरमेंटल क्राइसिस, जो कि सबसे मुख्य है, सबसे एकदम हाईलाइट में है। बट उसके अलावा भी बहुत सारे क्राइसिस है, जैसे फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस। हमने रिसेंटली हमारे पड़ोसी देश है श्रीलंका का एक उदाहरण देखा है कि हाउ दैट spilled over into various other crises, starting from that foreign exchange crisis से शुरुआत हुई, फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस, देन एनर्जी क्राइसिस, बहुत सारे अलग अलग संघर्ष जिससे हमारे आज के पीढ़ी को गुजरना पड़ रहा है। तो इन सब ये सारे जो कॉम्प्लेक्स इश्यूज है, how they are all interconnected and how it can be structured into a proper framework, so that we can decide how we are going to respond to this crisis, different variety of crisis which may not sound so interconnected, but finally somewhere कहीं ना कहीं वो सबके एक डॉट्स कहीं ना कहीं मिलते हैं। तो उन सब के प्रति हम किस प्रकार से इसको रिस्पॉन्ड करेंगे? So he is an explorer. Basically, he's an explorer into such non-mainstream disciplines. And today he will take us into a territory which we don't know that we don't know। हमें यही नहीं पता कि भाई हमें क्या जानना चाहिए। पहले तो वो पता चले तब जाकर के हम उसके साथ कैसे डील करने वाले हैं, हमारा रोड मैप तैयार करेंगे। तो ज्यादा समय ना लेते हुए मैं सुधीर जी से उनको आमंत्रित करूंगा कि अपना वक्तव्य शुरू करें। बट उसके पहले हमारे मेंटर डॉक्टर विपिन सर हमारे साथ है, तो सर को रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा कि अगर वो दो शब्द कहना चाहते हैं आज के विषय के संदर्भ में, तो प्लीज सर।
थैंक यू विशाल। और सुधीर जी आपको प्रणाम। अप्रैल महीने में जब भी मैं उदयपुर था और मैं कॉन्फ्रेंस अटेंड कर रहा था, जो इंटरनेशनल कॉन्फ्रेंस टू सस्टेन दी अर्थ, वहां आपसे मेरी मुलाकात हुई। मेरा मानना ये था कि आपको कुछ अच्छा समय दिया जाएगा, लेकिन एज यूजुअल कॉन्फ्रेंस में जो तो होता है कि आधे के घंटे के बजाय आपको कहा गया कि 15 मिनट में खत्म कीजिए। तो आपने जो जो कंटेंट उस समय पे दिए और उसके बाद में मैं आपसे 5 मिनट तक मिला, और आपने जो बात कही कि वी डू ओनली लुक एट क्लाइमेट क्राइसिस, लेकिन सिर्फ क्लाइमेट क्राइसिस नहीं देखना है, हमें क्लाइमेट क्राइसिस देखना है, हमें फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस देखना है, हमें सोशल क्राइसिस देखना है। तो आपकी जो ये बात मैंने सुनी तो मुझे लगा कि नहीं, यू हैव अ कंटेंट एंड यू हैव अ गुड रिसर्च वर्क ऑन दिस। तो मैंने वहां से ही संगीता जी को फोन किया कि भाई हमारे नेक्स्ट अप्लाइड जैनिज्म में, बिकॉज यू सी अल्टीमेटली एनी रिलीजन विच वी टॉक अबाउट is to answer the questions through which we are going to have the problem, and each of these crises are actually becoming very critical in our life. We are not realizing it. एक तरह से हमें लग रहा है कि we are progressing, दूसरी तरफ में ये लग रहा है कि भाई whether we are really progressing or we are creating a hell for our new generation. तो आपके विचार हमारे सब यहाँ जो भी आज प्रेक्षक है उसके लिए बहुत बढ़िया रहेंगे। It was my desire to come and see you in Chembur at your office, but somehow the other, because of my other activities, I couldn't make it. मैं definitely आपको हो सके उतना जल्दी मिलने की कोशिश करूंगा। 28th of June I am going to USA for 3 months, लेकिन उसके पहले मैं कोशिश करूंगा आपको मिलने की। तो सुधीर भाई, the platform is for you and we want to listen to you, something which is so innovative, something which is so interesting, something which is so inspiring, which will definitely make difference in our life. So welcome Sudhir ji. Thank you.
Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, yes.
First of all, good morning, and I would like to thank Dr. Bipin and Sangeeta ji for and the entire organizing team to give this opportunities to discuss this very critical, complex issue with a smaller group. मैं ये टॉपिक ही ऐसा है कि इसमें डेप्थ में नहीं जाएंगे तो मजा नहीं आएगा और चीजें खुल के नहीं आएंगी। एंड विशाल जी ने भी और विपिन जी ने भी जो बात का जो सारांश रखा है वो बिल्कुल सटीक बैठता है। तो मैं कोशिश करूंगा कि आज का जो डिस्कशन है, मैं इसको टॉपिक जो है, ये टॉपिक मुझे संगीता जी ने सजेस्ट किया था कि रीलोकलाइजेशन एंड deglobalization is something which will resonate more. But the interesting part about what I do is I can take any topic and I will eventually I could come to the core framework. So आज भी मैं वही करूँगा. There will be two parts in today's discussion. The first session we will spend very brief time discussing about what is this deglobalization or intensive globalization activity, why this is discussed. Very briefly, I will give my comments on that, and then I would approach the same question from a different lens altogether. Uh, uh, so one or two points before I proceed. There is a general disclaimer for those who have not heard me before that there will be many new terminologies packed in this discussion. Many may be new to you. So there is no need to get overwhelmed. In the sense, what I'm trying to do here is create a coherent narrative. So if I'm introducing different concepts, it is only in the interest of introducing that particular lens. At the end of the day, I will try to weave all these lenses and ideas together so that it could make more sense to us. Okay. Please, I would request that if you can note down your questions, and when we would have our question answers session, that time we could take up all of them. The idea is to listen to the entire proposal, and then I will. And one disclaimer, that I am not an expert on all these disciplines. I would know these disciplines to the extent it answers the questions that is important for me. Okay, so I will try my best to address any questions you have. But as a disclaimer, as I said, I don't know. These are such big issues that people spend their entire lives in each of these disciplines. And I have only spent last 5, 6 years on these issues. I have my limitations, but I will do my best to defend the proposal to the extent possible. Okay, so I will be sharing my screen now. Is it visible to everyone?
Yes.
All right. So let me begin my presentation. So this is the broad outline. We will first take up the issue of intensive globalization and relocalization. Then we talk about then I will introduce the crisis response transition framework, which is my core proposal. In the end, we would discuss what could be the best case scenario and worst case scenario that we are confronting. So, before we dive into whether the future of humanity is in the direction of intensive globalization or whether it is in the direction of relocalization, let us try to visualize what an intensive globalization future may look like. What are the elements of this kind of a future? So I have broadly listed out certain features of this future. So I imagine it to be a very high throughput. So throughput as in highly energy and material intensive future, highly technology, high tech systems, and extreme complexity based civilization. So we are anyways a very high tech and complex civilization today. But if we continue to intensify globalization, we can imagine many orders of magnitude higher. Secondly, we can also imagine centralized institutions like the world governance, IGOs, international, intergovernmental organizations, state, nation state, military, all these institutions, we can imagine them strengthening even more. Thirdly, it will be a technology market dominated global economies, which will be largely dependent on technological performance and resource use efficiency. So we would be a very efficient economy because we will be deploying a lot of technology to make for higher performance sakes. You can imagine the dependence of every economy on other economies for essential critical needs like food, energy, medicine. This is already true for every country. We depend on other countries for many critical things, but this process will be intensified. As a result, we would have lower resilience to shocks. Next, we could also imagine a continued commitment to exponential growth of population size and economy as cultural goals. Like today, it is taken for granted that economy has to grow. It is at least one thing on which every nation of the world is unanimous, that economies need to grow exponentially forever. There is absolute unanimity. So we can see this happening. We are already predicting that by 2050, the global economy would be double its current size. Okay. So we are doubling populations and we are also doubling economies at an exponential pace. We can see continued reliance on fossil fuels. And of course, I do not see renewables, new renewables like solar and wind replacing fossil fuels, but they will be an additional source of energy consumption. Relative decoupling, that means environmental destruction and economical growth. That kind of relative decoupling is possible, but overall we will see ecological overshoot happening and pollution also increasing. One very important trend that would go up is domination of artificial intelligence in almost all aspects of economy. So you can imagine at current pace, we can imagine by 2050 it is quite likely that AI will dominate almost all job sectors. And lastly, materialism, science, and technology will remain dominant cultural value systems. Okay, so this is the path that I see. If we move towards intensive globalization. What about uh, relocalization? What about What does relocalization even mean? Okay, so relocalization is a concept uh, that also needs to be spelled out, because people have to imagine, what it really looks like. So a deglobalized or relocalized world would be very low throughput. That means compared to today, the energy and material consumption would be much lower. Uh, it will be a low-tech civilization, and complexity would be extremely low. By complexity, I simply mean countries would not be dependent on other countries for critical needs satisfaction. Basically, absence of long supply chains. We would also see in this world centralized institutions losing their power and relevance. We can see emergence of stronger decentralized local institutions like biocultural regions, villages, commons-based communities. Now, commons-based communities have been historically the nature of our civilization, but post-industrial revolution, commons-based communities have disappeared. So we can see kind of an emergence in this scenario. Local economies committed to resilience and self-sufficiency. Okay, that is, most of the production and consumption would happen locally, and the trade, of course, trade wouldn't disappear, but it would not be at current levels. People spend majority of time and energy on survival needs, basically food, water, shelter, security, and with very little surplus for discretionary needs. Entertainment, sports, arts. This is something very advanced, and I don't see relocalization would have that amount of social surplus. And lastly, this is something I'm increasingly drawn towards: re-emergence of nature and religion as society's binding forces and value systems. When current uh, institutions like science and centralized institutions, when they disappear from the scene, society will eventually fall back on systems which have worked in the past. But I do not intend to see going us back. Okay, so I'm seeing a phenomenon wherein we carry the gains of industrial civilization, science, and then we carry these traditional values also with us. So this is broadly what it looks like. Okay, if we go on the path of intensive globalization, what the world might look like, and if we are going along the path of relocalization, what does the world look like? Now, I would like to bring in the context why this is discussed, why people are suddenly discussing slowbalization or deglobalization. See, because there are two kind of groups of people who are doing this conversation. One is a knee-jerk policy response. There are certain things which have happened in the last 6 years or 7 years, because of which there is a pushback to globalization. We saw a lot of benefits coming from globalization, but now there is a lot of pushback. People don't like every aspect of globalization. And secondly, there is an ideological demand. There are a lot of groups who have been demanding a move away from capitalism and globalism right from the 1950s and 60s, perhaps. So it is this group which has always preferred localized, low footprint, ecologically sensitive way of living. So their demands are coming from both these areas. So let us mainly focus on the knee-jerk policy response from which this whole debate emerges. So when this begins, is this debate intensifies approximately around the time Brexit happens. Britain chooses to leave European Union, and Trump election. And since then, we are seeing a lot of right-wing political parties coming to power all over the world. So one diagnosis is that globalization has not worked for everyone, and many people are left behind. And these elections represent that, people wanting to go back to old ways. So let's make America great again, bring back the jobs, this kind of thing. Okay, so this is a big pushback which came from this phenomenon. Then most importantly, this intensified further from the COVID-19 pandemic onwards, and then Russia-Ukraine war. Both these phenomenon, both these incidences brought some very important ideas, or made people realize that countries and businesses are extremely thin. They are very vulnerable to supply chain shocks. See, most of the global economy today runs on just-in-time supply chain. That means you don't have a great inventory, big inventory in your factories. You order it, and your supplies come very in on short notices. But these two shocks made us realize that it is not acceptable. We can't be manufacturing medicines with all the critical ingredients, majority of it coming from some other country. If it is not able to supply, then your manufacturing process itself stops. So there is a lot of pushback here also. A very good example is European Union passing this Net Zero Industry Act, wherein they are saying that they will only source solar panels from those companies which do, or those countries which do not have more than 65% market share. So basically, they are saying we will pay a premium for solar panels, but we will not buy it from China because China is unreliable. Either due to supply chain shocks or due to geopolitical risk. You see, this is unraveling of the globe. The whole logic of globalization was every country would produce something which it is good at. That means at a low price. Economy of scale was the logic. But now suddenly people are realizing economy of scale is good, cheap goods are good, but that makes us super vulnerable. So let us now try to make the supply chain shorter, even if it means goods becoming expensive, products becoming expensive. So this is the reason why people are quoting slowbalization and deglobalization. Thirdly, tech infrastructure divide. Now, everybody realizes that there is a huge superpower struggle between China and USA on the technological front, especially the 5G telecom sector and the artificial intelligence sector. There is a divide. So there is, so there are two groups of manufacturers and suppliers. Now, countries are very, very skeptical. Countries are very it is like the Iron Curtain of the Cold War days. People have to now choose sides, whose technology to buy, because geopolitical risk can make countries vulnerable. So this is also the reason why people are questioning the globalization. Globalization simply meant so far that every country will trade with each other, and they will not bring in politics or geopolitics in this trade. So you can safely rely on imports. But with these new multipolar situations emerging, this is a huge doubt. And this is the ultimate, nail in the coffin, the geopolitical risk. The example of USA banning Russia from SWIFT during the Russia-Ukraine war. This was like an eye-opener for many countries in the world. Everybody thought that these big technologies are like neutral. They're politically neutral. So we could always use them and we can rely upon them. But this war demonstrated that if you are not on the side of the superpower, which controls this technology or the infrastructure, then you could also be treated just like Russia. So then countries start talking about their own, technological infrastructures. But the moment every country goes away from common infrastructures, then globalization also recedes. It is not possible if everybody has their own standards, everybody has their own communication infrastructure, etc., etc. Countries trying to move away from petrodollars. These are all examples. So there are a lot of examples why this whole discussion is taking place of deglobalization. So I have certain, and lastly, the debt crisis, which was discussed earlier. What happened in Sri Lanka? What happened in Pakistan? So all these phenomena are questioning whether globalization is the ultimate good. Does everyone benefit or only handful benefit from this? So these are all the contexts in which this debate emerged. Now, I would just like to briefly close this whole discussion by giving my take on what I think about the situation. Whether I think things are moving towards intensive globalization or things are actually moving towards deglobalization or relocalization. So what we see here is most attempts to augment national security or resilience are initiated this time not by markets, but by nation states. So this is not something which is emerging from the market or private sector. This demand is emerging from trying to bring some kind of self-sufficiency and stability and resilience in domestic politics. So this is emerging from nation states. This demand is emerging from nation states who feel vulnerable to supply chain and geopolitical risks. But should we take these initiatives or this conversations very seriously? I have a feeling that we need not take this very seriously at this point, because economic growth powered by cheap energy has become a cultural goal for all the nations in the world. All economies subscribe to this idea that economy should grow. And intensive globalization is at the heart of achieving such a goal. Okay, so any effort or talks about deglobalization will only lead to some kind of cascading collapse across the globe. And what is the best proof of intentions? So my view is commitment of governments towards physical infrastructure, especially the energy infrastructure, transport infrastructure. These are good indications whether a country is serious about tackling climate change or deglobalizing. And they are very good proxies to understand whether anybody is serious about these things. If you look at the investments made towards fossil infrastructure and investments made in other areas, it is a very good indicator that countries are assuming that world is moving towards intensive globalization. So we don't see any major trends in investments or in other sectors which indicate that any kind of slowbalization is voluntarily happening. Hence, voluntary global economic transition towards relocalization, that is producing and consuming locally for local needs, is something I don't see materializing. Okay. So this is the first part. So this is what I'm saying. Under current situation, I don't see this happening. But forced deglobalization or forced relocalization in the context of abrupt societal collapse due to the triggering of global crisis. Now, this is a different approach that we are about to explore in this presentation. So my take is, if things go on the way we are assuming it will go, then intensive globalization looks like the future. But now, if we can just step back and try to take a very holistic view of the situation, define the crisis, and then let us reassess whether relocalization or forced relocalization is a possibility or not. So let us, at this point of time, let us hold our judgments till we till I introduce the framework. Okay. So the way I look at the situation, it is something like this. Currently, we are at a juncture wherein four kind of possibilities are there. One is the techno explosion, that is intensive globalization wala future. Uh, where economy goes on exponentially growing, and somehow we are able to continue to manage this forever. Second scenario is the techno stability future, wherein uh, we can maintain current levels of global GDP or wealth. And of course, here we are talking about redistributing the wealth among nations more equitably. Okay, but we can certainly maintain current levels of prosperity. This is the mainstream take right now. This is where there is maximum consensus in the world that we can, if we are able to stabilize ourselves. So the mainstream is somewhere between techno explosion and techno stability. This is where majority of the energy and time is spent, and money and resources are spent today. Then there are two more scenarios. One is a creative descent. Creative descent as in we voluntarily collapse, voluntarily degrowth or shrink the size of the economy. Okay. Now this is the third scenario where we do this voluntarily, or in our language we could say voluntary relocalization. And then there is a last scenario of abrupt collapse. We don't do anything. We go on with business as usual, and abruptly system starts or economies start collapsing. Okay, without recovery. So you see, we move in terms of social wealth. We move to pre-industrial levels of energy as well as social wealth. So we will come back to these four trajectories for human civilization at the end of this presentation. Okay, seeing where it takes us. Now, let me bring your attention to the principal crisis that we are facing today, and I'm calling it crisis in sense making. And here I would like to present this idea through this very famous parable. I am sure everybody must have heard at some point in their childhood about this parable of the six blind men and the elephant, wherein the six blind men are asked to describe the elephant based on the part of the elephant they are touching. Okay, so it is but obvious that everybody describes the elephant differently. Okay, so elephant, we know, or a person who has eyes, who can see it, knows for sure the elephant is neither it is neither a pipe, nor it is like a wall, nor it is like a pillar. Okay, nor is it is like a brush. Someone who has seen an elephant knows elephant is none of these things individually, but it is something totally different. So right now, this is what is happening when we are diagnosing what is the problem with the civilization. People with different lenses or people from different dimensions are analyzing the crisis in their own way. So there is an ecologist would define the entire problem in terms of environmental destruction, resource depletion, etc. An economist would describe everything in terms of resource efficiency and economic growth, prosperity. You could have a complexity science expert defining it in a different way. A technology guy, a person from a technology background, would try to solve this or define the problem in a different lens. But what happens is when we do not factor in the constraints posed by all the dimensions, or at least all the important dimensions, what happens is the scenarios built up by each of these dimensions are not realistic anymore. So what is required at this stage is to understand that the crisis is not restricted to climate change. It is not restricted to peak oil. It is not restricted to financial debt crisis. It is not restricted to artificial intelligence or artificial general intelligence alone, or nuclear or etc. So what happens is there is just too much of clutter in terms of problem or disease diagnosis. There is a lot of clutter. So what happens is there is a saturation. We know for sure that more information does not necessarily lead to any behavioral change. Many times it leads to mental shutdowns. So this is something which I was suffering from 6-7 years ago, because I was not able to figure out, because if you hear one expert, that person looks correct. And then when you hear another guy defining another problem, that person also looks correct. Sometimes two experts disagree on the same crisis definition, and then both look correct. So this leaves common people like us confused. So the number one requirement here is, how do we diagnose and how do we make sense of the crisis, and how do we prioritize those risks? Unless we do this, the second step of responding to it is very difficult. Very difficult. We will never reach the second step because we will go on fighting with the step one. So the crisis response and transition framework that I was able to conceptualize is basically an empowering tool. It's a sense-making tool, which and a consensus-building tool. It empowers anybody and everybody to filter out useless information, distracting information from useful one, so that people can make up their minds on something. You don't need to be an expert to decide whether Green New Deal is useful or not useful. Okay, you don't have to outsource it to a scientist anymore. And unless we have something like this, so my hope is that after the presentation, each one of you will be then able to look at policies, proposals, strategies which are thrown at you. You will be able to classify them on your own and zero in on something that you think now is sustainable and it is worth the effort. Okay, so we will try to unravel this elephant. What is this elephant? What does it look like? And the beauty about this is something like this. I normally give this example. There are a lot of stars in the sky at night. For people who do not know what a constellation looks like, you will never notice it. But once somebody shows you a particular constellation, it is very difficult to then unsee it when you look at the sky again. Okay, so it will be difficult to first recognize the elephant, but if you are able to once recognize the elephant, then it is very difficult to then unsee again. That is my proposal. I hope it works that way for each of you. So let us now define what is the crisis. So there are multitude of crises, but I am simplifying it. I am giving it a name. I'm calling it global crisis. Okay. And global crisis basically emerges in this context in two ways. One, it is the inevitable, abrupt, involuntary societal collapse. Normally, people talk about environmental breakdown and climate change, global warming, etc. But I look at societal collapse as an immediate threat, and not necessarily environmental breaking down anytime soon. That process may take time. So the first part of the risk that global crisis is about is the inevitable, abrupt, involuntary societal collapse. And by collapse, I'm trying to say here, centralizing institutions like state and markets will disappear. They will become dysfunctional on a on a more or less permanent basis. Well, how do we operate when these two important institutions are dysfunctional? We call that situation as societal collapse. Okay, and then the second aspect of global crisis is a probable biospheric collapse. Okay, by which I mean accelerating towards the sixth mass extinction event. So in short, global crisis is basically these two risks: risk of societal collapse and risk of biospheric collapse. Okay, so within this, I will try to incorporate as many different trigger points coming from all dimensions. Okay, so I hope this point is very clear, that this is what we are trying to avoid, or this is what we are confronting. Okay. Now let me introduce the elements of global crisis. So as I said, global crisis is a multi-dimensional lens. So there are four dimensions particularly which I am trying to cover under global crisis. So imagine these four as four missiles heading towards us. And if we are not confronting even one of them, or if we are not able to destroy or avoid even one of them, then each of these risks have the capacity to trigger global crisis. So that means any solution of sustainability, if we talk about, it has to address the risk coming from all four trigger areas. These are our constraints. So whatever strategy and plan we may come about, these are the constraints on the plan. Okay. So we have to, our solutions have to answer whether it is addressing these concerns or not. So let us begin our discussion. I will try to briefly open up on each of these lenses just for the sake of introducing. Okay, just to make a coherent argument before we go to the response classification. So first one is the economy energy nexus. Why I feel that societal collapse is more of an inevitable thing than a biospheric collapse. The reason being, there is a direct connection between economy and energy. There is no modern civilization without energy. There is no modern civilization without energy. Economists make a very big mistake of defining economy in terms of money and finance. Okay, in real terms, real wealth is basically should be defined in terms of material and energy terms. Real wealth is energy, real wealth is material. Okay, now financial numbers make no sense if it is not backed by material and energy. Simple. Now you have to understand that pre-industrial revolution, we used to consume as a 1 billion population used to consume around 25 to 50 exajoules of energy. Fast forward 200 years, our population has increased 8 times. It has become almost 8 billion. And today we consume energy in excess of 600 exajoules. 600 exajoules. That is our primary energy demand annually. Okay, so this is equivalent. So the per capita energy available for every person is today 9 times what it was 200 years ago. Each person has 9 times more energy available for us today compared to 200 years ago. And there is a very interesting concept of energy slaves. If suppose fossil fuels or such energy sources were not available, then how many people would be required? How many slaves would be required to do this work? So one calculation was made, and it is said that to make this global, or to produce the world GDP, we require 500 billion energy slaves. If so much energy was not available, we required to 500 billion energy slaves working for us. We don't have 500 billion people. So imagine this energy, if when we lose access to this energy, we are suddenly at a very different level. That is why we call this energy descent future. So remember, there is a difference between losing access to energy and energy depletion. They are two different things. Here, I am not suggesting that we are at the risk of uh, depleting coal, oil, gas. No, I am simply saying we may lose access to this. And that means the death of modern civilization. Okay. Why it is going to be possible? Now we have to understand two terms here. One is energy cost of energy. So to even get some energy, you have to spend some energy. So when coal, oil, gas were discovered, the energy cost or energy return on energy invested was very high. It was a ratio of 1:100. That means if you spend 1 barrel of oil, you would get 100 barrel of oil for using end use. This number has now reduced to 1:18 for oil. It is 1:52 for coal. And for solar and wind, it is 1:3. You see, you have to understand one thing. When the energy cost of energy is less than 5%, okay, then the global GDP flourishes. And this is documented that whenever the energy cost has gone above 5%, between 5 to 10, it has triggered recessions. So this is a very important metric to understand. And what is happening is we have depleted all the cheap oil in the world. All the low-hanging fruits we have already consumed. Whatever is now available is much deeper, requires more technology. That means the price, the cost of accessing it will go up. And remember, this cost is most important. Today, our petrol price is 100 rupees per liter. We will still drive our car. But when it becomes 1,000 rupees per liter, we will not drive the car anymore. It's inelastic in that sense. Similarly, society cannot afford to spend more than 5-10% of its wealth or 15% of its wealth on energy, because we need surplus for other things also. So ऐसा नहीं है कि the cost will go up and we will go on buying it. That won't happen. And this is how the economy triggers. So I will come back to this point later, but yeah, this is a very important point you have to understand. The energy cost of energy is going up. Energy is still available. Don't go by production numbers. We have paid a very high price in terms of accessing it, and secondly, the pollution which comes with it. So the available oil, coal, and gas is extremely polluting for the environment, and it is extremely expensive. There will come a point where we may not be able to afford it. Simple. Energy will still be there. And the second risk comes from the fossil stranding situation. If we take climate change, global warming very seriously, and if we decide we don't want global warming, and we say let's not use fossil fuels, let us keep them stranded, let's not dig them, mine them, then also we are facing the same problem. Modern civilization cannot function without fossil fuels. I will come to this more in the coming slides, but these are very important points. So what we are noticing here is the financial economy is growing. Financial economy is growing, but the material and energy economy is not growing. And it is several times higher than financial economy is several times higher than material economy. So the $102 trillion of GDP that we are talking every day, that is not it is not backed by real assets. So we get confused by virtual assets and real assets. The pension funds and all the stock markets and all of this is not real wealth. It is basically a bubble that we are creating, and we are creating more bubbles like this. At some point of time, this bubble will break. So we talk about Jeff Bezos, the Amazon owner, with $1 trillion wealth. But all of this wealth is basically just numbers. It is not backed by anything real. If he tries to convert it for real assets, there may not be anything real there for conversion. So this is something which happens with every civilization. I will come to this point. So I hope everybody understand economy and energy are closely connected, and energy cost of energy is becoming untenable at this very point. And there is nothing which can replace fossil fuels to run modern civilization. Okay, we can go into this question maybe in Q&A about why I'm saying so. But as of now, please take it on my word. We could explore this in the Q&A session. Then coming to the second aspect, what do you mean by complexity? And so for that, I am trying to explain this like this. Just like, so you have an ecology on which simple autonomous human societies have always existed. Right from hunter-gatherer to post-agricultural revolution, villages, simple autonomous societies have always existed, but some of them emerge into large empires. And it is these cities or empires that we are calling complex civilizations. So remember, complex civilizations have emerged, and they emerge on top of simple autonomous societies. Okay. So what is collapse in that context? Collapse is basically simply, see, when a simple autonomous society becomes increases its food surplus, increases its population, roles become specialized, centralized organizations are created, it becomes an empire. So collapse is basically loss of this abrupt, sudden loss of this complexity. So civilizations emerge, they last for a few hundred years, and then suddenly, for many reasons, they collapse. Collapse does not mean everybody dies. It simply means the civilization loses its complex features and becomes once again simple autonomous societies. Why do I say this? Because there has been this long history of civilizations emerging in the last 4,000, 5,000 years. So this is a very important article which was published in BBC. The author was Luke Kemp, and he's analyzed civilizations. And we are familiar more with the Roman civilization here. We are familiar with its collapse. So when Rome collapsed, Rome did not disappear. Rome still exists. It was a empire which spread across 3 continents. Today it is just here in Italy. Okay, a city in Italy. So empires collapsing does not mean people die. It simply means it becomes much smaller and simpler. So civilizations on an average have collapsed. And the average lifespan has been around 336 years. So it's a very common phenomenon. Just like species are born, they grow and then they die. Civilizations also follow that trajectory. Okay. Now, there is something very different about our civilization. Modern global industrialized civilization. This is very different compared to all the other civilizations. How is that? Before that, I would like to demonstrate to you what are the indicators of a complex society or a modern civilization. What do I mean when I say we are a single homogeneous global civilization? These are the indicators. We all have surplus food, much more than what we require, we are able to produce. We have large population. We have nation states with full-time militaries. Once again, we take it for granted. Full-time militaries are taken for granted, but most of history, very few civilizations could afford full-time militaries. But we do that. It's very common today. Urbanization, majority of the population living in urban areas, very uncommon. But today it is true. 24/7, 365 days, we get water in our taps. Piped water, we take it for granted. Energy, electricity, sewage disposal, we don't worry about after flushing. Now, this is very unprecedented in entire human history. Global supply chain, tourism, people moving around the world for fun. Everybody does it. Leisure, entertainment, space establishment, satellites, all these are indications. This is something very we are the rare. This is the last few generations are the rare. We are the rare exceptions. We sometimes take it for granted that this kind of future is the future forever. But whatever we are experiencing today, in the last few generations, this is a one-time party. It is a one-time lottery for us. And that lottery was the discovery of fossil fuels. It's a one-time bonanza, and we are already enjoying it. A middle class today enjoys more than what the most powerful emperor in the world could enjoy. This is unprecedented, and we take it for granted. There are reasons we can't take it for granted, and this comes to a point that we are very different from earlier civilizations in the sense we are a single civilization. That means our economies are so tightly integrated that if one or a few economies collapse, it will take down others with them. This was not true in earlier civilizations. Other civilizations could parallelly continue without any problems if Rome collapsed. But that is not going to happen in our case. So we are an exception in this sense. If we go down altogether. And this is something which I have I've tried to this is a very important paper published by an author called David Korowitz. He's an Irish scholar on systems and complexity, and I converted his ideas into a visual representation so that it can be you can understand what is it that we call global industrialized civilization. हम बार बार कहते हैं कि everybody is at the service of the system. System जो है चलाता है. ये system क्या है? This is my way of describing the system. ये system है क्या? It is bigger than any prime minister, any president, or any country in the world. We have painstakingly created this system in the last 200 years, but we don't control it today. The system controls everybody. When we created this, we controlled it, but today the system controls us. So there are 6 pillars of this global industrialized civilization. The first pillar is fossil energy infrastructure. I have already described this to you. This infrastructure, right from mining and all the way till last mile consumer use, the entire infrastructure is an important global pillar of this civilization. Secondly, the financial and monetary system. So the energy infrastructure is it makes the things go physically around the world. The world actually moves because of energy, but it is the financial and monetary system that is an organizing framework. We organize our activity with the help of finance and monetary system. And the Notebandi was a very good example of this. Goods were there, energy was there, but people had no cash. People had no ways in which they could organize their activity or exchange. People were helpless. Suddenly the system paralyzed. So if banks collapse, if there is no currency available, monetary collapse happens for whatever reasons, the whole system crumbles. Why? Because banks issue credit for trade, international trade, right? So if banks are not able to issue this letter of credit for international trade, global production flows get affected. So remember, in production, it is very important to understand the output of one factory is an input to another factory. So if one input suffers, many outputs suffer in a cascading collapse. This also happened during the Ukraine crisis and COVID crisis. So you have to understand that this is an important pillar of civilization, international trade and banking system. The critical infrastructure I showed you in the previous slide, they are all the critical infrastructure. You notice one thing, even during COVID, none of the critical infrastructure was affected. Internet was functioning, electricity was there. Every major infrastructure was functioning smoothly. It is just that we could operate virtually, so nobody realized the problem. But if something happens and core infrastructure gets affected, then everything gets affected. Economy of scale, I have already spoken about. At the heart of modern global economy is economy of scale. Economic growth requires that goods become as cheap as possible. That is why production is distributed around the world. Whoever can produce the cheapest. So economy of scale is very important. If the goods are cheaper, more people will buy. If more people will buy, then more profits, and etc. etc. Suddenly, if the economy of scale disappears, the way we were talking about deglobalization, then suddenly this whole pillar also crumbles. And lastly, the trust deficit is very important. What happens is during the adaptive behavior, people do not panic. If people do not panic and people do not lose trust in their own citizens and in other countries, then the system functions. For example, when Sri Lanka was experiencing a crisis, Sri Lanka found it very difficult to trade with other countries because countries were not cooperating. So what happens is trade is basically about trust. I give you credit because I want to do more business with you in future. But if I know that your country's future itself is bad, then I will say you give me hard cash, then only I will trade with you. So what happens is loss of trust. If every country starts to look after its own interest, then what happens? Then globalization and the entire economy crumbles. Now, this is the big problem. This is a very big problem. If everybody looks domestic, then the entire civilization crumbles. So so basically, this is an indication of high-tech and high complexity civilization. To make all these 6 pillars function without interruption all the time, extremely high level of complexity, coordination, and technology is required. Now, one thing has to be understood, that all these pillars have to perform simultaneously. And even if one crumbles, it will take down others in a cascading collapse. So imagine our civilization is like an patient in the ICU ward. Even a small disruption can be life-threatening. It is sheer miracle that the entire economy operates so smoothly all the time that we take it for granted. Just like a patient cannot be stable, cannot be expected to stay in the ICU for too long. Similarly, we cannot be expected to not expect collapse in such a complex and such a very well calibrated system. Now, remember what is making all these 6 keystone hubs operational? It is these 3 things. Access to extremely cheap energy. Cheap energy means energy cost of energy should be within manageable limits, less than 5%. Year-on-year exponential growth and globalized economy. This is at the root of modern industrial civilization. You take away cheap energy, you take away economic growth. I hope everybody is familiar that it is compulsory for global economy to grow at 3%. If economies do not grow consistently at 3%, then banks start to fail because of the interest payments. So it's a compulsion on the system to grow continuously at a minimum percentage. Okay, so this is a very tricky thing. We have to keep on growing, and to grow you have to be globalized. You cannot be satisfied, you cannot be content. That is why you notice that we produce not because of satisfying need, we produce for the sake of producing. Every country, every manufacturer, every company wants to be the number one. Everybody wants higher sales the next year. Why is that? Are people crazy? No. It is a systemic demand that everybody grows. We are slaves to this system. Whoever does not cooperate with this system loses out of the race. Any country, any company, any individual. So this is what controls politics. This is what controls economics. This is what controls day-to-day decision making of everyone. So whenever you talk of system, this is the system. We are all at the service of this system. Every government, every company, every organization is at the service of this, of the goals of this system. If you are cooperating with the system, you grow with it. And if you do not, you are out of it. It is this invisible system that we have to understand. Economic growth is an imperative compulsion on the system. That is why you will notice that environment and none of these things are stopping us from anything. Because if you stop, you start crumbling. We have devised everything around economic growth. So this is what happens with every civilization. Year on year, every civilization becomes big, it spreads itself too thin, and then there is diminishing returns on the system. And then that civilization has to self-correct. This is exactly what has happened to us. Okay. So any pandemic, any cyber attack, any back-to-back shocks, the system has resilience only to a particular point. After that, back-to-back shocks we may not be able to take. And as I said, it only requires one major catastrophe, one major pillar to crumble anywhere. It will spread in other areas very fast. That brings us to the third dimension of the economy, ecology. We all understand that economy is embedded within the society, people, and the entire society's needs are satisfied within the context of environment. So environment produces ecosystem services which societies and economies need, without which we cannot survive. No species on the planet can survive if ecosystems do not produce ecosystem services in a healthy way. But we are doing something that is interfering with this good system. So how is it that our economic activity is basically affecting ecology? So whenever we say GDP, whenever we say GDP growth, we are basically talking about these 5 processes: extraction, production, distribution, consumption, and then throwing, excretion. So today, this is the economy. Whenever we say economy, economic processes, we are talking about this. So whenever we say GDP is growing, we are basically saying extraction is increasing, production is increasing, distribution, consumption, and waste. Excretion is waste. So we have this linear system currently. So GDP growth का मतलब सीधा है कि we are depending on ecology. There is no GDP growth which is disconnected with environmental degradation. There is a very important term that you have to understand: decoupling. There is this idea among many economists that if a country becomes prosperous, then its economic growth is decoupled from environmental destruction. But there is no evidence for that. So by GDP growth, what are we doing? We are doing 3 things. We are consuming resources, renewable resources, at a rate faster than the replenishment rate of that resource. Matlab, we are consuming fresh water faster than the recharge. Okay, so we are doing many of these things with renewables. We are consuming non-renewable resources like fossil fuels, okay, at a pace which is much greater than the depletion rate of those resources. Okay, and thirdly, we are producing waste which is at a rate many orders of the time higher than the capacity of the system, ecosystems, to absorb those wastes. So whenever we say unsustainability, we are basically talking about these 3 things. Herman Daly, who's considered to be the father of ecological economics, defines it in this way. What is unsustainability? This is unsustainability: consuming faster than replenishment rate, depletion rate, and uh, absorption rate of the waste. So when we do this, we are basically doing what is called as ecological overshoot. So this chart that you see is indicating that we are currently at level C, between C and D. C is the overshoot, limits that we are not supposed to cross. We have already crossed. What is required is that we should be oscillating between A and B. So this is basically the level of resource consumption. This includes everything: energy, resources, etc. So we are consuming many times higher than what we should. Okay. There is this concept of planetary boundaries which explains this very well. Okay. And this is the landmark paper which was written in 2009 by Johann Rockstrom and his team. And this is a very important framework which introduces this idea. Just like human beings have vital stats which indicate the health of our basic health. Similarly, we have the planet which has these dimensions. 9 basically symptoms of the planet which we keep a track of. Okay, so you can notice out of the 9 we have already overshot 4, and climate change is only one of the 9 symptoms. So this is the proof that we have basically overshot planet's capacity. What is required is that we should be within those dotted lines. You can see that's a safe operating space. But we are already exceeded on 4 counts, and other counts we are doing it now, right now. So as globalization intensifies, we are going to be exceeding those limits. And out of these 9, climate change and biospheric integrity are the 2 core symptoms which have a direct effect on all the remaining 7. I don't have time to get into each one of these, so I will skip this part. But the point here you have to understand is we have already overshot on many counts, and climate change is just one part. Phosphorus, nitrogen pollution in the environment, and rate of loss of species, they're already in the red zone. We are already crossed the danger line. So the general health of the planet doesn't look good. And the previous slide explained the connection between our economic activities and environmental limits. 1961, our total humanity's footprint was within the planet's carrying capacity, biocapacity. So biocapacity is basically whatever planet produces in a given year. Ecosystem services produced in a given year. Our consumption was within the capacity of the planet to produce that. Fast forward 60 years, we have now reached 175%. That means we have 75% in overshoot. Imagine bulk of the world population is still not prosperous, and we have already overshot. We are already overshot what the planet can afford. Okay. This brings us to the understanding what happens if we overshoot our limits. What happens? 5 mass extinction events have happened in the past. None of them were caused by any single species. So we are the unique in this phenomenon. Okay, so mass extinction basically means mass die-off of many populations and the ecosystems collapsing completely. We call it 6. Many scientists are saying that we have already in the 6th mass extinction. We are not going to, we are already. And this phenomenon is called as Anthropocene. Anthropocene simply means that humanity has become a geological force. Okay, we have become a geological force which can either steward the planet or we can destroy the planet. We are the most dominant species in every ecosystem today. Okay, so we have the power of life and death over the planet. And societal collapse is something which was predicted long back. I'm not sure if everybody is aware, but there is this very famous publication of Limits to Growth in 1972, This was the first mathematical model which demonstrated that if industrial civilization continues under business as usual, then somewhere between 2040 and 2050, we will experience some form of collapse. Okay. This was predicted in 1972. It was heavily criticized because economists and scientists believed that the earth was so abundant that it is impossible for us to overshoot. Fast forward 2017, a Harvard researcher, her name was Gaia Harrington. She rerun the numbers on this study, and she was surprised to notice that the data matches the prediction. We are on track to the prediction made by this mathematical model. So anybody who wants to understand what I'm trying to say here, then Limits to Growth 30 years update is a must-read book. It is very convincing in terms of the numbers and scenario analysis. So what is required for us is to have a one planet civilization or one planet living. Currently, we are living as if we have 2 or 3 planets. Our economies are our policies are such that we are assuming that there are 3 planets. So there is a requirement of bringing down our throughput radically. So this is the ecological overshoot analysis. Okay. There is this very important point I wanted you to understand, that there is a lot of work going on, and I normally call this work as accountants of the carnage, in the sense we have enough data to know that this trajectory is harmful. But most of the research and most of the work of experts and scientists is moving in the direction to tell us how precisely we are going towards the edge of the cliff. So I don't particularly see any sense in that, because it makes no difference when exactly we are going to fall off the cliff. Once we understand that we are heading for a cliff, that then we need some corrective action or we need some preparation. But becoming more and more accurate in prediction is not something which is going to benefit us in a big sense. And now let me introduce the fourth and very critical dimension, that is, what is the role? Why technology is a huge risk here? I'm talking about dual use exponential technologies: nuclear, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and nanotechnology. Now, all of these technologies have dual use in the sense they increase the economic efficiency, increase profitability, etc. But at the same time, they are also possible for weaponization. And among these, nuclear and artificial intelligence are the biggest threat. So I will not go into bigger details here, but we have to understand, just like the remaining 3 risks, this is a risk we have to tackle, because this can single-handedly trigger both societal as well as biospheric collapse. The risk of AI is something that we are underestimating, and the pace at which it is improving is beyond the social control. We are, as a society, our systems are so slow to catch up with the pace at which this technology is grown. So to our own detriment, we will be ignoring this. So let me now come to the crux of it. What is global crisis? Global crisis is basically a definition of unsustainability. That means any system which is having unsustainably high throughput, that is energy, ecology, material footprint, any system which is having high rising cost of energy, any system which is super complex in the sense high-tech system dependent and dependent on long supply chain, and any system which is allowing runaway exponential technologies to proliferate without control. So global crisis is all of these put together. So global crisis is equal to unsustainability. So if this is unsustainability, what does sustainability look like? So any sustainable solution, any sustainable response strategy would have radically lower throughput at the global planetary level. By radical, I mean at least 50% to 70% lower than today. Two, it will be running on renewable energy. So what do I mean by renewable energy? Any system of energy, which can be produced and implemented using renewable energy. So solar and wind are new renewables which cannot operate, which cannot be produced without fossil fuels. So if we are going to have a civilization, then it has to depend on traditional renewables. That is biomass, human animal power, wind, water mills, etc. etc. Thirdly, it will be a low-tech system, simple technologies, and very local supply chains. It won't be a complex system. And lastly, runaway exponential technologies will have no role in such a system. So this is my framing of what sustainability looks like. So three terms are very important. Technologies and so sustainable technologies and solution must be ecologically sustainable, technologically feasible, and financially viable. And most importantly, within the constraints of time and scale. Remember, global warming gives us very limited time. We don't have another 3 centuries to make this happen. So whenever you test any technology, you have to test it on all three grounds. It should be ecologically sustainable. It should be technologically feasible to scale it up, and financially viable. You can't have something super expensive which nobody can afford. Okay. So when we apply these conditions, many of the ideas go out of the window, and we will be left with very fewer choices which are workable. Okay. So based on how I have framed global crisis, now I come to the heart of the responses. So what I have done here is I have classified all global responses, strategies into broadly three categories. Currently, what is happening in the world today? Today, we are defining our biggest crisis to be like an energy crisis. What is being said? It is being said that industrial civilization is very good. It is a desired goal. But what is the problem? The problem is fossil fuels. So we will replace fossil fuel with renewables, that is solar and wind, and then everything is perfect. But we know that that is not true, because the operation of the industrial civilization is causing ecological overshoot. It makes no difference whether it is powered by nuclear fusion process, or it is powered by any other cheap and pollution-free source of energy. The real problem is the operation of the global industrial civilization. But the moment you make it an energy problem, then what happens is everybody runs behind solving that problem. But in my understanding, it is a wrong framing of the problem. We are not facing any energy problem. The real crisis is overshoot. The real crisis is industrial civilization ka operation. We need a different kind of a civilization which does not create overshoot. If you ask this question, then suddenly different answers will emerge. But if you simply ask climate change is the problem, then you will say renewable is the answer. And then all the grants, all the research money will run in that direction. So today, that person or that organization is considered green, who is basically working in the field of renewables. Simple. So if you are green, if you are renewable, matlab you are doing a great job. It is assumed that it is possible to be done. So first of all, what we are saying here is there is enough research evidence that 100% replacement of fossil fuel is currently not possible. Two, even if we succeed in doing that, it does not address global crisis. It does not address ecological breakdown. Then why run in a race where even if you win the race, you're going to lose? That is my way of looking at the situation. Okay. So in short, there are three broad responses that we are throwing at the problem today. Business as usual, it basically is a response which is saying that, fossil fuel is not a problem, economic growth is not a problem, there is no environmental problem. Something like what Trump would say. So there is no problem. Let us continue doing whatever we are doing. More prosperity will solve everything. Okay, more economic wealth, more GDP will lift all the boats and everybody will be good. So no need to change anything. That is a business as usual approach. There are very few organizations and people of this kind. The majority is in the weak sustainability category. Weak sustainability is simply saying that environmental problem is there, but it will be solved by technology and markets. Okay, so you can see all the examples on the right side. Sustainable development, green growth, circular economy, GDP, urbanization, all of this is an example of big sustainability. It looks like it is solving a problem, but it does not address the core issue. So what is required right now is a strong, sustainable response, which acknowledges that industrial civilization operation itself is a problem, and it believes that markets and technologies do not have the answer to the predicament that we are facing. So we support those efforts which are taking us towards or preparing us for a societal collapse like situation and whatever comes after that. Okay, so if you can look at any proposal, policy or strategy, and if you can classify into BAU, weak and strong, then your job is simplified. Okay, so what is transition? Transition is basically moving away from where we are today to where we want to be, what is more desirable. So this page you can see, these are the examples of what today
जी, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
अभी और कितना अभी presentation बाकी है?
एक 5 मिनट में वाइंड अप करूं?
हाँ, because then we should have
I know,
time for
I know,
Q&A as well. Please,
I
please.
realize that I will wind up soon, and then we can go for
Yeah,
Q&A.
please.
Yeah. So this is what current game A looks like. This is where we are today. But what is happening right now is we in my understanding, we should aspire for strong sustainable responses and a strong sustainable future. So these are all the efforts, commons-based efforts, bioregionalism, open source initiatives, transition towns, eco villages. I don't have time to go into details of this today, but these are the efforts which have the potential to take us to a more sustainable future. Okay, so it is important that we more light is thrown on their efforts, and that we understand the potential of these efforts and these strategies, and enough resources should be diverted in this direction too. So coming back to the final thing, in my understanding, we are in between creative descent and collapse, kind of a abrupt collapse and creative descent. So abrupt collapse is something that is most likely because of the following reasons. You see, the human nature itself is going to be the biggest obstacle. What is this Homo sapien is saying? And so while the end of the world scenario will be rife with unimaginable horrors, we believe that the pre-end period will be filled with unprecedented opportunities for profit. So this is exactly what goes on in boardrooms of corporations. They would like to make profit from this sinking ship also. And this is something, it makes more sense to us. Assuming the present trends continue, the odds are quite good that we will be the best informed extinct species on the planet. Even with all this information, it is unlikely that we might do something before it is too late. Okay, we have this ostrich-like mentality. Whatever doesn't conform to our preferences, we tend to ignore them. Okay, so coming to the final conclusion, we are facing a catch-22 situation. Catch-22 situation in the sense everybody understands that we should do some critical surgery to this system, but nobody does it. This is the big problem. So deglobalization, relocalization, fossil fuel stranding, all of these are examples of that critical surgery. The problem with this surgery is, if you do it, the patient will collapse immediately. And if you don't do it, after some time, the disease will kill itself. So no government, no leader wants to do it. And that is why you will see that the climate negotiations have been going on for the past 4 decades, but nothing has happened. The needle has not moved. This is one of the big problems of this situation. As a result of this, I am forced to conclude that the most likely worst case scenario is we confront a societal collapse like scenario unprepared. So my view is we cannot avoid a societal collapse because of the situation in which we are. So worst cases, we go in unprepared, and the best cases, you prepare for this transition and wait for the we do all the preparations necessary to deal with this transition. That is something which is not happening. I would apologize for taking more time than was actually allocated. Now I am open for questions.
Ajit ji, if you can please coordinate this Q&A session.
Yeah, sure. Jagat ji, you had a question.
Hello. Pranam Sudhir ji. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Pranam Sudhir ji. Thank you, Dr. Bipin Bhai and Sangeeta ji, for organizing this wonderful session. It was one of the best I have ever attended on this platform, because I am very close to environmental subjects. Now, what I am trying to highlight is that environment and economics will never go together. That is what I believe. And because we are not carrying along the environmental aspects along with development of all kind. And that is what all has created the problems so far. And they are increasing at a rapid pace. Now, second point is that I believe, just as you, that no technology can solve environmental problems.
I would like to interrupt here. I lost your voice. I lost your first point. I could not hear. There was some
My point is that environment. Yeah, Sudhir Bhai, my point is environment and economics, I believe, will never go together. The speed at which development is taking place and human population is increasing, agriculture land is going down, cultivable land is going down, and we will not be able to sustain the population at large with whichever technology we come out with. So going back to nature, and we have many a times discussed on this platform about minimalistic lifestyle. That is the solution, and no politics or government can deliver it. And so everybody has to start on their own only, whatever they can do the best for themselves, for the society, and for the coming generations.
Thank you. I just would like to add to that. The problem here is not whether we as an individual decide what we decide. The problem is going to be the transition. If everybody does not do it, or if enough people do not do it, then individuals making it won't make any sense. That you take a farm, you create your own oasis. When the crisis hits, and if your neighbors are not as prepared as you are, then all your efforts go into drain. So if we are to succeed, then we need a significant mass heading. And I totally agree with you that top-down systems are not designed for addressing this predicament that we are facing.
That's
and
true.
Communities are the only hope. There is no safe future for an individual. There are only safe communities. So that, because normally what happens when we hear all this, people become preppers and they try to secure themselves. but unfortunately the problem is so huge that we cannot be safe as individuals. We have to seek safety only in communities. How we do it is the biggest challenge.
See, one of the good examples is, say, Mizoram and Bhutan. They are practically carbon neutral. They are going everything along with development, maybe slow and small development, but they are all carbon neutral and living a happy and organic type of life. So that is one successful model which can be at the policy level. If implemented from the top, only then it will make it work.
As I said,
Otherwise, it's a bad luck that we have taken birth in this generation.
yes. So this is the best and worst of time.
Thank you.
Ruchika ji, you have a
So
question.
we have the best stuff.
Ruchika ji, can you unmute?
Yes, thank you so much. Sudhir ji, that was a fantastic presentation. Really, really good. You said that IPCC and COP are the carnage, the accountants of carnage. And I would just want to know your opinion as to why do you say that?
I didn't refer them as accountants of the carnage. See, they are anyways compiling the work of other published literatures, peer-reviewed literature. I was referring to the effort of people to scientifically prove as accurately as possible their claims. So my whole point is, even if one day they prove with full accuracy that in 5 years exact time this is going to happen, it will make no difference, because it is not that the policymakers do not understand the risk. It is just, so what much about the problem. It is not okay to talk about alternatives or make a radical shift in alternative. So accountants of the carnage, in the sense, keep everybody busy with the research and work, but at the end of the day, it does not trigger any action work. Right now, the more data or getting sinking in more data is not going to help our situation. Knowing is enough that this is not sustainable. So then the more talk should be about what is sustainable. But then IPCC coming and telling us, oh, we were not, we were wrong, or we underestimated. It will be because most of their data is 7-8 years old. By the time they get published, they are 7-8 year old data. So can you imagine, they will always be, and being scientists, they will be conservative in their report. So scientists themselves will never say something sticking their neck out. That is the first point. They will always put, play it down. Secondly, whatever IPCC says is a political consensus. It is not a scientific consensus.
Right.
And political consensus will always is committed to the service of the system, which I was talking about. The system wants growth. If anything is going to any surgery which affects economic growth, it is not acceptable. So when you and I know it already, then why bother too much about the warnings? Why bother too much about the next report? Now all the predictions of IPCC are taking 2100 as the basis. Now what is the logic behind that? Why 2100? What is the reason behind it? There's no reason behind it. So you are assuming that every problem is 8 decades away. Now what happens is, when you say 8 decades away, all people who are deciding, they're saying, okay, I am going to be dead. I don't have to worry. So different kind of decisions happen then. So that is why I said it's okay to have numbers. Even I research, but then beyond the point, I don't bother about accuracy. I am more concerned about action. That is why I made that comment.
थैंक यू रुचिका जी. और किसी को कोई सवाल है? Does anybody has any questions? विशाल जी.
Yeah. So if there is no other question, then we can wind up today's session. It was really a wonderful session. I mean, it raises more question than providing a simple, straightforward answer to the problem that we are facing, and that is because this problem itself is so novel, so complex that requires a lot of brainstorming. I think it's a good beginning. You have provided a very good platform, Sudhirji. I mean, you have introduced us to the problem in a completely different manner, which I mean, the aspects which were not known to us. So yeah, I think it was a very good beginning, and we would love to hear more from you as an extension, in a continuation to what we have already discussed. Thank you so much for your time today, sir, and we look forward to hear you once again. One
Thank
more
you
time.
everyone for being patient, and I would be happy to engage
Thank you so much.
on any of these topics. Thank you everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye.